Hello, it's been a while. Okay, so your video is basically how do you feel about women using their sex as a way to, take advantage of the marketplace. And how do you feel about that? I'm perfectly fine with basically pornography, cleavage, sex work. I'm fine with basically people using whatever they have, all of their assets to basically succeed, because I think that for a long time we've kind of existed in this sexual repulsive culture where it's taboo to even admit that sex is attractive and that we purchase into it. I get a little tired of all like the sex jokes on the comedy channels and in the sitcoms, mostly because the only reason it's funny is because we've lived in this sexually repulsive culture, repressive culture for so long that we can now say sex or fuck and we giggle about it and it's somehow funny when really it's just perfectly natural. Like dogs having sex is really not really any more interesting than people having sex if you think about it, or it surely shouldn't be, because that's just animals doing their natural thing. And it's, I think it's fine. It's the problem that I have with the way that sex is viewed today is that if you think about whether or not the United States is going to legalize prostitution, or the way that we handle basically, sex work, is that it's a very exploitive industry where usually it's seen as an occupation of last resort. And so that means that the women that enter into it tend to be vulnerable. They, tend to be able to, can be victimized. It doesn't have to be. There's no reason why this necessarily has to be true. It just happens to be that because sex work is illegal, because many of these sort of, sex trades, exploitive trades are, are potentially can potentially produce victims, and it's not legal, means that if a stripper wants protection, she's gonna have to get the bouncer to protect her. If a sex worker wants protection, she's gonna have to, she can't call the police and say, hey, I'm in a bad situation right now, because it's not legal. So they have to work with pimps. Right, so there's a lot of socially taboo situations. I think that would be a lot better if we just sort of acknowledge the facts that sex sells and instead dealt with it in a mature way. The problem, I guess I didn't really address it. The problem that I have with the sex industry and basically the way that sex is produced today is the objectification of women and the exploitation of women. If you look at pornography, I'm perfectly fine with porn in the sense that, it's a lot of people, both men and women, use it to, enjoy themselves, pleasure themselves. But the problem with it is that many of it is very objectifying, that people are dehumanized, seen as objects, that they're taken advantage of certain situations, and it's exploitive. And there's no reason that sex has to be exploitive. You can have pornography that's more like softcore porn, or it just happens to be that the kind of way that we view sex today, it's very much in a kind of a place where men are dominating, women are being exploited or being submissive, and I think that this is not good. And it's the same way with if you see the women on YouTube that are basically using their boobs and their fine legs and their golden lock hairs and whatnot to basically get ahead, is that they're not necessarily, not all of them are hot for words. That is definitely taking advantage of her assets to basically have a linguist's discussion. She's a linguist basically. Some of them only rely on their boobs and their cleavage and their beautiful looks, and this means that instead of actually having any substance, is completely objectifying the body, and really you're not really getting anything out of the person. You're not getting a point where somebody with really good looks is telling you something substantive. No, it's like just the looks. It brings it to the thing where like that person is no longer important because they have no substance. It's only their boobs that are important, and that's I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with people using their looks to get ahead, but I would want something supported behind that. I guess a second additional thing that I would want to address is the idea that when people get on hard times, you know, this might be seen as an industry to like, you know, or you just, at that point, you'd use whatever you had to get ahead. Self-admission, once upon a time, I lived out of my car for a few months, so, and you could say I was technically homeless. But I think one thing that, like, you know, I met some people there that were, you know, in that time that were also homeless, and I have to say that homeless people tend to get a little bit too good of, they get too much consideration a lot of times, because if they were homeless like I was homeless, then really they put themselves in that situation. Really, like, you know, I was feeling destructive. I'm the one who put myself in that situation where I was living in my car. I could have got a job at McDonald's. You know, there are a lot of homeless people who are actually homeless, not because they, you know, are, you know, the victims here, but actually in the sense that they put themselves there. They were like a product of their own bad decision making, their own destructive tendencies. There's another kind of group of homeless people that are really, you know, they are disenfranchised, usually because of mental handicaps where they're not very well adjusted to society, and this is partially, you know, this is partially just the fact that they don't fit into society. Like, nothing's necessarily totally wrong with them. They're just a little bit strange. They may have some communication problems. They may have some anger management problems. But this is necessary that these things would be able to normally be dealt with if our society were just a little bit more tolerant. So there's the really crazy homeless people. There's the homeless people that just don't really fit in society, so it's hard for them to find a job. And then there's sort of the people that basically are homeless because their own bad decisions wound up, you know, being homeless. And I think it's about half and half, you know, in the sense that there's half of these people that like have mental things that keep them from sight, and then like there's a very large group of people, homeless people, that are kept out because of their own bad decision makings. There's a lot of people that basically become economically disfranchised because they have too much pride. You know, they were like, I'm the engineer, I don't want to clean toilets, let the Mexicans do it. You know, and it's just like, what the hell? Like, I don't care if you have a degree. Like, you obviously have some issues to the point where, like, you know, you got in too much debt, you're a bad money manager, like, you know, you took out too many credit card bills and all the due dates come along and you couldn't pay, and now you're like totally homeless and you're like, what am I gonna fucking do? Like, that situation is understandable, but it's not society's fault. You know, you are ultimately responsible for your own life. So I think when you went through your intro video and you were basically talking about how times are hard, I think it's important to keep a really, you know, kind of an accounting about people who happen to basically be victims of circumstance where they were laid off from their job and they didn't know that was going to happen, and they had purchased a house, to people who were like, you know, biting off more than chew, and really their disenfranchisement, their economic disenfranchisement was really a product of their own bad decisions. 9 minutes, gotta cut it. Can't talk too long. Yeah, so anyway, sex, I think that our society should get over it. Yes, I know that we were sexually repressed for thousands of years, but I'm just so tired of like sex being like this taboo subject, or like this sort of subject that basically needs to be held off and kept away from our children. I have no idea why we live in a society that basically shelters their children rather than educates their children, because this is all gonna, like, you know, they're gonna run into porn someday. You know, you might as well, you know, let them have it, you know, like, guide them through it and say, this porn is not okay because it's exploitive. There's nothing wrong with people having sex, but this would be wrong, you know. It's like, anyway, guess I'm gonna let you go. Bye bye.